Now, we look at this very interesting topic about vegetarianism and non-vegetarianism, an often discussed topic. A lot of youngsters, particularly in the age group of 15 to 35, has this conundrum in their mind saying, is it okay for me to eat meat or anything that's non-vegetarian? And also, what does vegetarian mean and what does non-vegetarian mean? That's also a question. Could be religious beliefs, it could be traditional practices, it could be any number of reasons. But the point is, it's a very, very hot topic, often discussed, and you may be wondering what is right in there, what is the right answer and what is the wrong answer for that. So let me give you what the Gita and the Upanishads have to say on this topic. I do want to start off by saying, I'm a big believer and a firm believer that what you eat is your own personal choice. And of course, you're responsible for your choices and your actions. So what comes out of it, again, is your choice. So I'm not going to take any sides on whether you should become a vegetarian if you're not, or whether you should be a non-vegetarian. That's not my role. I'm here only to tell you what the Gita and the Upanishads have to say, that I strongly believe in and I practice. Now, vegetarianism, unlike what I've heard a few times, is not based on the principle of least harm. If it was based on the principle of least harm, then eating a dead animal is probably the least harmful compared to anything else. Eating, let's say, a plant as an example. So it's not based on the principle of a least harm at all. The Upanishads make this very clear. So a very, very popular and one of the primary Upanishads, there's like 14 primary Upanishads. We should probably do a whole video on Upanishads and their structure. There's 14 primary Upanishads. One of them, which is amazingly applicable in your daily life, is the Taittiriya Upanishad. And there, the Upanishad clearly says, the source of nutrition and the source of this growth of this body, even for this body to be born, was food. Your parents were able to get nourished properly, had food. That's how they had the energy, and you were born. You are eating, and that's how you are growing up. So the source of everything is food. And there the Upanishad says, food is to be grown from the earth through the natural resources of sun, air, and water. Basically, the Upanishad says those are the herbs and the plants. So the source of nutrition and what is to be eaten is the herbs and the plants grown with natural resources of earth, air, water, and heat, of course. Then the Upanishad also talks about the different types of subtle bodies we all have, or this entire universe has. There is clearly the gross body, which is no air in it, no breath in it, no mind in it, or we call it the inanimate objects, right? Like a stone is an inanimate object in that definition. So you have those bodies. And then you have bodies where there is breath, prana. Then you have, which is the plants and all of us, animals, us, everything. Then you have the beings that have a element of mind in them. So the animals have mano, has a mental faculty. We have a mental faculty. But then you have the next level, where a lot more intellectual discriminating ability happens. You have some animals with that capability, and of course humans have that, and that's vijnana. So pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya is what it's called. And then lastly, the ability to completely be in a spiritual level, be in that spiritual plane, which maybe there are animals also in that plane, But at least as far as what we know, clearly humans can develop that attitude, or that is called Anandamaya, which is being at peace, being in that spiritual zone. So those are the four. So the Upanishad says, look, out of these four, the least is the one which is again demonstrated by the plants and herbs grown out of natural resources. That is one you should focus upon, not the ones which have mental faculties, which have intellectual discriminating ability and all of that. That you should leave it, but focus on that. That is what the Upanishad talks about. The Gita takes a completely different view. The Gita actually focuses on the characteristics. As with the Gita, it focuses on the attributes and the characteristics and the flavors of food, and puts them into modes of goodness, modes of passion, and modes of ignorance. It puts you into these three categories. It puts the food, rather, the flavors and the characteristics of food in these three categories. So what the Gita says is, look, if you'd like to be in the mode of goodness, again, Gita gives you a choice. If you would like to be in the mode of goodness, then you would eat foods that are healthy, naturally tasteful, and nourishing. Which means you would avoid foods that are sour, salty, hot, pungent, and dry. You would avoid those, but you would focus on the other types of foods. And you would avoid overcooked, stale, impure food, because that would put you into a mode of ignorance. And if you end up eating food that is of the characteristics of being too spicy, too hot all the time, then you would get into a mode of passion. So the Gita says, for the right balance, you want to avoid foods that are by nature pungent, not transformed. Transformed, of course, you don't want to have foods that are transformed to be pungent, but by nature, they should not be pungent. By nature, they should be nutritious. By nature, they should be healthy. By nature, they should not be too sour or salty. And when you eat those types of foods, the Gita says it puts you into a mindset of goodness. And Gita associates the mental tendencies with the type of food the person has. Now, there's one verse in the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad. There's actually one or two verses in the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad which almost appear to come out of random. And they refer to eating of a young bull. The only reason I'm pointing this out, again, what you eat is your own personal choice, but I'm only pointing this out because it just doesn't line up with the rest of the teachings of the Upanishad and the Gita. So there is a couple of verses that refer to eating the meat of a young bull. Now, I've reviewed the verse, I've researched over the last few years many times on how this came about. It just appears out of nowhere, random. Towards the end of a chapter, it appears just out of nowhere and random. So I am just coming to the conclusion of that. I have come to the conclusion of that it could be a later addition, deviating from the original source. How it crept in, nobody knows, at least for sure. I don't know. But I thought it's good to mention it because it doesn't sync up with the knowledge and the learnings from the rest of the 14 Upanishads or the Gita. In closure, food is a personal choice. Having said, I gave you what the Gita and the Upanishad talks about. Krishna, in fact, describes in the Gita, in chapter 6, verse 16, Krishna says, look, if you want to get into a spiritual attainment, or you want to get onto the mode of spirituality, then you cannot perfect it. You cannot perfect it by eating too excessively, by eating food that is not of the right mode of goodness. Neither can you attain spiritual perfection if you just lazy around by eating unhealthy food.